Hello, hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Skeptics and Seekers Sunday Sermon. I'm David Johnson. This is for us. I think I said those backwards. Let's get started with some very special guests that will be introduced here in a little bit. What we're gonna do right now, though, because we are waiting on Dell to deal with some internet issues, is we're gonna do a live short. By a live short, we're gonna actually do a short with the participation of guests if they would like to join in, because we have got Darren and the Emperor in the green room, and they have control of their microphones. And so I'm just going to see what happens. As I do this, I could share this screen. I think that, no, I'm not going to share the screen because I got to do some stuff with it. But what we're doing, we're going from the Christian Post. And there's a story in the Voices section. Love this section. Sadie, I think this is the Voices section. Actually, no, this is in the news section. This is from a couple of days ago. Sadie Robertson Huff recalls terrifying moment. Baby stopped breathing. Credits God for recovery. Now, I love a good someone lived when they could have otherwise died story. I know that I seem very jaded at times, but I actually like those stories. That's a good thing happened. And you can mock the religion or what have you, but a baby didn't die here. And so let's not lose focus on that. That said, the scaffolding that is put around the good news that a baby didn't die is so nauseating. It's really hard to see the good news sometimes when you're dealing with these kinds of stories. So, in fact, I'm going to shut off my camera for a little bit because I'm going to have to really lean in here to read this story. All right, that should have shut off my camera. So let's go. Let's do this. Sadie Robertson Huff has praised God after a frightening incident. Let's see if I can get all this in here. After a frightening incident in which her infant daughter choked, but said it is still grappling. Said she is still grappling with anxiety in the aftermath of the traumatic ordeal. And again, my humanity reaches out to her for that. I still get the cold sweats and heebie-jeebies over traumatic things that have happened to me in the past. It's a very human thing. In this case, her baby almost died. So when things like that happen, you can, in fact, forgive some of the stupid things people say. All right? And so let's just bear that in mind. That's probably the last conciliatory thing I'm going to say, though. So here we go. The 28-year-old Duck Dynasty star and author shared how her youngest daughter, Kit, who was born in August, suddenly began choking while sitting in her high chair during dinner preparations. Within seconds, you could tell the severity of the situation, Robertson Huff wrote, adding that her mother quickly pulled the child from the chair and placed her in her arms just as she stopped breathing. Mom called 911. I started CPR and everyone began to pray out loud, she said. Okay. Here the story starts to fall apart. Because I thought this was like a miracle thing. and this was going to be a good help me spot the miracle story, but surely we should be able to see it because this baby has stopped breathing. She choked. You can't live very long, especially if you're a baby, without breathing. And surely this is going to be the kind of story where the miracle would be apparent, except it's ruined already. She started CPR. What the heck? I mean, thank you for starting the CPR, but there's no God in CPR. You took training to be able to do CPR. You're probably very wealthy compared to the average person. You've got resources, but there's one glimmer of hope for the miracle, and everyone began to pray out loud. So what do you think? What do you think? Does the baby live if she does CPR and they don't pray? Or does the baby die? Was the prayer the thing that did it? Can we say, let's read on, there's more. Robertson Huff, who said she had previously watched videos on how to respond to emergencies, credited both preparation and her faith for saving her daughter's life. What role did the faith play, though? Because now we learn that she was also prepared. She had done preparation and CPR, apparently did it right enough to save. I can only explain it now like my body just knew what to do, she wrote. I felt God's Spirit guiding me. I remember saying out loud, what do I do? And then immediately started doing it and declaring life. Again, this paragraph, I almost made it through this paragraph without something too egregious. What does she mean by declaring life? This is a very kind of charismatic type language if you're not familiar with it. And it is sometimes literally done just by people saying loudly things that they declare into the world. I declare life! But what was going on while she was declaring life? She says she felt the Spirit. Well, what was the sign of the Spirit? She said, what do I do? And then she just started doing it. You know what causes that? Prior preparation. That's what causes it. Yeah, maybe you haven't done it before, but you've had practice, you've had time to ponder on it, you've got some muscle memory. So that's what happens all the time. This is what happens with doctors as they look at a patient they've got to cut open, and they've maybe done it a million times. And they say to themselves, okay, what do I do? Okay, first this thing, I make this stitch here, and I do this thing right here, and I make this cut. Okay, that's just how it's done. That's how we do it as humans. And so you've done all that, but the real magic is, I declared life! There's a little bit more. I think I'll just do one more paragraph. After performing CPR and following choking response protocols, Kit miraculously coughed and began to breathe just as the paramedics arrived. How do you miraculously cough? So here, full disclosure, I worked at Red Cross for a season. I had CPR training, as pretty much everyone who ever worked in Red Cross does. There's nothing miraculous about it. It's not miraculous. Okay? Someone is choking on something, it's blocking their airways. You move the thing that's blocking their airways. The clearing often happens in the form of a cough. It's not miraculous, especially when you've done proper CPR. The family spent the night in the hospital for observation, but Robertson said her daughter quickly recovered and is now perfectly healthy. Congratulations. Still, the reality of the near tragedy has lingered And so there are a lot of issues there. And let's see, there was one other thing that happened here too that makes me question the miracle. But yeah, this is clearly it's a miracle. You know, there was CPR, but they also prayed out loud. Which one was effective? There was preparation, and then what she claims feels like the spirit guiding her, which is just the preparation. Um, there's the cough after a correctly done airway blockage. There's also the declaration of life. Which one of those did the job, do you think? And finally, the thing that really kind of bothers me about stories like this is what they are saying about their God, how absurd it really is if they stop to think about it, if they just stop to think for a second. Because through all of this process, what she's really saying, she doesn't realize this is what she's saying, but what she's really saying is if I hadn't prayed out loud with some people, if I hadn't gone over in my mind what I'm supposed to do, if I hadn't had the preparation, if I hadn't done the CPR, if I hadn't declared, forget the CPR part, I'm sorry, if I hadn't declared life, then God would have let the baby die. That's what they're really saying. If I hadn't, if all the special stuff hadn't happened, if I hadn't brought God into it appropriately, my baby would have died regardless of everything else that was going on. God would have let the baby die. That's what she's saying. That's the God that we're supposed to be worshiping at a time like this. A God that, if she hadn't declared life, that baby was done for. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But that's just me. How about you, Skeptics and Seekers? Squarespace.com. Log your Discuss account. Discuss ways. Send me an email, skepticsseekers@gmail.com. Until next time, I'll see you in the comments. And in the meantime, Darren, did you have any takeaways from this story that I did not?
No, I think you covered everything. I think if the religion has to give God credit for everything, even their own actions, I think your case for miracles is really, really poor.
Hey, Dale, welcome to the show. Everyone's about to mute up here and get consigned to the balcony across the street. Dale, I imagine you heard some of the short that I shoehorned in while we were waiting on you to clarify your internet. In a world premiere first, I am going to give a Christian a chance to respond directly to one of my more acerbic shorts. Did you want to throw in a comment
Could you
there,
just,
Dale?
so yeah, I literally, I wasn't listening, but could you just, in 2 sentences, summarize what's your main thesis here? And then
Yeah,
I'll give
another miracle story. Baby uh, choked, probably eating. She was in her high chair, choked. The people did CPR. The baby miraculously coughed and started breathing again. There were lots of things, including preparation and actual good CPR and care that was done, but there was also praying out loud and declaring life. And yes,
right.
it's a charismatic kind of thing. They declared life on the baby, and the baby came back. And for me, I just love it when Christians do that because it just makes every biblical miracle sound stupid. It's like, oh, if that's what they meant by miracle, if that's how they got the miracle stories from normal mundane stuff like this, then we can ignore the whole mess.
And
Uh,
so it's the parents that are declaring this a miracle, right? Not
yes.
like the medical professionals and
No,
stuff.
no. It's the parents, and also I would say the Christian Post because they ran the piece.
Yeah, so obviously Christians define miracles in different ways. So like Gary Habermas, for example, will talk about miracles level one or miracles level two, and this goes back to C.S. Lewis and stuff like that. So I don't know the theology of the parents or how, obviously I'm assuming they're just regular lay Christian. So maybe, to them it is miraculous, right? We speak about the miracle of childbirth and stuff, but there's nothing from a rigorous Christian apologist standpoint that, oh, we can prove a supernatural event actually took place here. I would sort of be skeptical myself with these kinds of claims and just say, no, I think it was an awesome natural event. Thank God the baby was saved from choking to death and stuff like that. But I see no reason to posit a supernatural miracle here unless there's more to the story that I'm not aware of and
There
stuff.
isn't. There
This kind
isn't.
of thing happens all the time naturally in non-religious contexts all the time. And that's one of my falsification criteria. If it's not unique, if the type of event is not unique to extraordinary contexts and stuff like that, then right away that falsifies that we can prove it's a miracle kind of thing or a supernatural event.
All right,
So,
everybody, you heard it. Dale said that there are no real miracles in Christianity, and with that, I'm out. Okay, so
okay, we can skip the show on the resurrection.
no,
Well,
no, no, no.
there is a miracle here because somehow beloved Darren Lute thinks that Apologia is a good guy. That's supernatural. There's something going on there.
I think Polish is a good guy. I think he's smart. He does really good shows.
Okay.
He he does a
Did I
lot of
cause,
he brings
huh?
a lot of scholarship. Look, we talked about this before before the show. Got it out of our system so that you didn't have to deal with that. So, without any further ado, let's jump into, because we're a little bit behind here. I still think because my theme can be delivered in a very short way, I've taken some notes for that in case we have to reduce. So we will go to the reduced version of this and get through the theme. So thank you, Emperor and Darren, for being in the gallery. Hopefully we have time for a little after show after we're done. Thank you, Dale, for agreeing to come and challenge my thesis. And so by way of opening, what I want to say is that there are some things that this argument that I'm presenting is not. So those who remember in Easter a few years ago on Unbelievable, I kind of tried to make this theme that was an earlier version of this theme. But the Unbelievable format can be harsh and unforgiving. And so I don't think that I was able to get it done very well. I didn't quite finish it. And so I had been working on it a little bit since then. And so some of this may not be entirely new to some of my audience, but I think it is going to be new to people who have not been part of my audience, because it's not the typical resurrection polemic on either side. So this is not about, for instance, contradictory stories, at least not at a high level. There is some of that because it's hard not to have that, but that's not what this is about. That's not the main thesis of this argument. It's not entirely about the lack of evidence. Okay, again, there's some of that my thesis might mention, but it's really not about that. It's not about rebutting standard talking points, such as no one would die for a known lie, like Joseph Smith. It's not about rebutting that kind of stuff. Your standard lines that the resurrection debate goes on, just kind of set those aside. And if that's the expectation that you have of this debate or discussion, it's not really that. That's not this thesis. And if this thesis dives too much, it can touch upon, but if it dives too much into any of those things, then it's off topic, as far as I'm concerned. So what it is about is why resurrection is an unnecessary stumbling block. I think there are some unique problematic qualities of the resurrection of Jesus. And then thirdly, I think that the appearances and ascension are problematic in ways that people don't tend to talk about a lot. And so I've got about 10 minutes of opening argument to do, but rather than do that, I might just work it into discussion. Dale, you've actually had a long time to sit with my thesis. And did you have anything that you would like to say at this point?
Okay, you didn't want to give your opening or
I am.
anything?
I'm going to come back to it. But one of the things that I kind of don't like about some of the shows that do the opening arguments is that the opening of can go for 15 or 20 minutes sometimes. Like a formal debate, and it can be a long time and a lot of information. And I think that is a little bit difficult for the audience sometimes. And it's a long time before other people on the panel get to make their points. And by the time they do, the audience has forgotten a lot of what has been made. And so, what I'm trying to do, it's not to say I don't have anything to talk about here. It's to say I've introduced what I want to talk about, and I'll get to it. But before I jump all the way in there, I just want to give you a chance to maybe introduce if you have an argument or a claim that you want to do, or maybe some initial thoughts that you want to get in before I start taking up a lot of time.
Yeah, I guess so. I was supposed to read over the thing you sent me because I know there's more than just the initial point, and because of my computer, I literally turned it on at 7:30, and it took me till now to be able to come on. So I wasn't able to read that, but from what I know of your main thesis, I think what we're here to discuss is the notion of the significance of the resurrection. Your main claim, from my understanding, is Christians, there's nothing significant about the resurrection. It's just another miracle and a heap of miracles, and there's nothing of theological import to it. And so my main thing here is to challenge that and say that's absolute bunk, and you know it. As a former Bible believing Christian, or at least a claimant to that, right? I think you weren't a preacher, but you were kind of a youth pastor and stuff like that. So you would know the Bible very well. That the Bible teaches the resurrection is the first fruits with respect to Jesus. It's the
Just
first.
just while I remember it, I was an assistant minister at a single place, and a traveling minister who did revivals and gospel meetings and special events all over. And so I was a preacher.
Okay, so then
Yeah.
even more so, it's shocking then, right? You should be supporting the thing because we have to see what does the Christian Bible claim for itself, and because that's the nature of your claim. You're saying according to the Christians and Christianity and the Bible, there's nothing significant about this, but no, it is. It literally is called the first fruits. Why on earth would Jesus' resurrection be considered the first fruits when all the apostles knew about Old Testament resuscitations and stuff like that, which were miraculous and were wondrous, and people love that? Well, it's because of the theological significance of Jesus' resurrection. So number one, he's the first one in history to be resurrected in a glorious resurrection body, meaning it's eternal. It's not going to die again. Whereas the other people are going to die. Lazarus once again lived an ordinary mortal body and died. Jesus also gained certain powers, right? He could appear and disappear at will, which some Christians speculate might be interdimensionality, stuff like that. What else? Also, in terms of the importance of his resurrection, this is what did away with death and sin. It defeated death and sin. So Jesus, through his death, paid the punishment for our sins. He atoned for our sins. But without the resurrection subsequent to that, sin and death still would have prevailed and won. Jesus would still be down in hell and stuff like that. But no, he conquered sin and death after the 3 days. And that's what the resurrection symbolizes. Now, death and sin have been defeated. And because Jesus is the conqueror and free, he can now dwell in your hearts and apply the benefits of undergoing the punishments for our sins to us and sanctify us in our hearts and transform us. None of this would be possible without the resurrection actually taking place, with Jesus as the first phase, and then bringing to completion his mission where we all will be resurrected on the last day. And that includes Lazarus, who was resuscitated once, but was never resurrected from the dead. He didn't have that glorious body. He's going to be resurrected on the last day
All right.
again.
Let me go ahead and just cut you off there. I know that you have more
No, that's it.
to do. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and continue with my opening thing to because it sounds like you're going to have a lot of things in a more of a rebuttal stage, and it's some of what you say here is going to be a response to my theme here. And so let me unfold that, and I'll do that as quickly as possible so that we can get into some back and forth about that. So let me just say, the resurrection as unnecessary. This is in fact my first point. So first and foremost, when I say that the resurrection is unnecessary, I mean from a world religion slash philosophical, a general theophilosophical point of view. Religions tend not to rise and fall based on resurrection claims. Religions simply don't need them, and I focus on Judaism because that's the one that is directly related to Christianity. Christianity is a response, if you will, a fulfillment, if you will, of Judaism. Judaism did not require resurrection. In fact, Judaism would, I think, by and large, have considered that idea heresy, because Jesus wasn't just some guy who was resurrected. As you say, Judaism has resurrections. I'm going to read one right here in a minute because I think it's my favorite resurrection story, and so I just want to include that. But Judaism didn't need prophets to rise from the dead. It could happen. They didn't need it. They certainly would have rejected the idea of a dying and rising God. That would be an immediate disqualifier because their God cannot die. So in the after show, if there's time, and maybe a little bit in a show, I want to talk about a dying God. That's a problem. It's a major problem, and it's a stumbling block, once again, especially to a Jewish audience, because it would imply that a God died. Their God died. And that would mean that God is not immortal. You would have to
just so you can organize the time effectively as a host. I have to go around 12:30 to 1 o'clock. So just make sure you include, because that's an important part. So like, just so you know how the timing works.
No problem. I'll try not to spend too much time on any one point. So this resurrection does not help the transition from Judaism to Christianity. It was not necessary. You could get followers of Christianity without a resurrection. Jews had been following God forever without, the idea of a God rising. In world religion, most religions do not feature a resurrection of anybody important. It's just something that's not needed. It's an extra complication. So when I say that it is an unnecessary stumbling block, that's mostly what I'm talking about. Now, with Christianity, I absolutely understand some of the themes regarding resurrection, but I would argue even among some of those specific themes that you mentioned, resurrection is still unnecessary. it complicates a thing that is not necessary. You could get the result of all of that without a resurrection. So it is an interesting study to try to figure out why resurrection became important for Christianity. I have some thoughts about that, and maybe we'll come back to that. But for remission of sins, you didn't need a resurrection for that. That's just a specific theological wrinkle. It does not have any contact with the real world. And so you can, on the one hand, say religiously anything you want to about what your resurrection is, but all of that is rhetoric. We couldn't be forgiven without resurrection. Well, that's rhetoric. You can't, that's unfalsifiable. There's no way that it makes sense in a natural world that you can't be forgiven without resurrection. That's just something that religious people might say and then thus believe. But that wasn't even part of a Jewish religion claim. Sure, something had to die, but nothing had to rise. You can say we've defeated sin and death. But again, that's just rhetoric. We still sin, we still die. So, you can say it's something that you'll see it when you die, after you die. But anything that, is proven or substantiated by, you'll know the truth when you die. It's more of a cult, I think, than a religion. It's certainly not a claim that anyone who isn't already a part of it would believe. And so I would say very solidly on this point that it is unnecessary to accomplish any of the things, including the very specific theological things of Christianity. You could have told the story differently and not needed a resurrection. So there's nothing that some outsider looking at the story who's trying to be convinced of the truth of Christianity would say, oh, well, but that resurrection, that changed everything. It simply doesn't exist. So before me moving on to my next point, I will give you a chance to, we can maybe do a little bit of back and forth on this point so that your ideas don't get lost.
Yeah. Okay. So your point. Obviously, from Christianity, you get so the death from a Christian point of view. First of all, it is absolutely essential and non-negotiable because there is the redemption involves not just the redeeming of the sins or the atoning of the sins. The death fully accomplishes that. I agree, but the resurrection accomplishes the full-on redemption in terms of sanctification. That's impossible. If you have a dead Jesus and he's still dead down there in hell, experiencing relational separation from God, which is what I define hell as, he can't save anyone. He can't do anything for me. I'm still in my sins. I'm still have the same sinful character. I can't be in a relationship to God. That only happens once Jesus rises from the dead and then can dwell in my hearts and sanctify me. So that's the whole redemption aspect of a new creation. And that starts with human beings because even the Old Testament will agree we dominate the earth and stuff like that. And the earth, from a Jewish perspective, was cursed through our sin. So it needs to be redeemed through us being redeemed as the stewards of the earth first. So Jesus is starting with us. None of that would happen without a resurrection. And even
why wouldn't it happen?
Even the Jews recognize that, right? That's why they said, well, we have to be a resurrection at the end of the world. They didn't understand there would be two phases where the Messiah would be resurrected first 2,000 years before, or 3,000 years before the end of the world, before Judgment Day. But they in the book of Daniel saw, there's a resurrection. We need to be made new creation in order to be redeemed from what happened at the fall. So from a Jewish perspective, I think I can still defend it. Now, you bring up, okay, but forget about Jewish. I'm just talking strictly secular philosophy. And there certainly other religious worldviews, Buddhism is directly contradictory to this, right? Their solution is denying yourself and stuff like that. A lot of people have this creation is icky and yucky. We need to escape it. And it's funny, you'll you'll see a lot of the Eastern religions, a lot of the pagan religions, and like Gnostics and stuff like that. They have this misguided notion. Christianity is unique, and Judaism is unique, and saying no, I'm not going to abandon sin contaminated creation. I'm going to save it. I'm going to redeem it, and that's something that a lot of Christians see as beautiful. Now, how would I defend that the Christian solution of death and resurrection is essential from a secular viewpoint? So I guess I would just go, yeah, like I would utilize the philosophy in philosophy of law, the justifications for punishment. So I would say I would try to establish that death is the necessary consequence for sin. So certainly all of us agree that from a moral or ethical perspective, we do stuff that's wrong. And I'm just thinking this through on the fly here, right? So I think all of us could agree with that, regardless of disputes about an objective standard or whatever, blah, blah, blah. We all admit, yes, we do stuff wrong. And the world could be better. This is not an ideal world from a moral perspective. So, okay, we have this question. How do we go from this world that's a mixed bag at best to that ideal world? How am I gonna? Yeah, so I haven't thought about this in terms of proving it from a secular standpoint, like some kind of argument. I would need to somehow connect. Okay, death is something that's universal among human beings and stuff like that. Um, yeah, I don't know. Somehow I would need to connect death to the moral failings of this world, through a secular argument or something that I can't think of on the spot. And then once we get the death part as, okay, well, this is the necessary consequence of it, well, then it follows if the solution would be resurrection, because that would be life kind of thing. So maybe a principle of life. Life is better than death. You would agree with that. And so therefore, yeah, like if we have a world that's where people die, that's bad. And therefore, a world where people get to live and experience life is better than a world where people die, kind of thing, right?
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
given we're in a world that's people die, the best we can do, and I'll shut up after this, is, well, they can be resurrected after, so they still have eternal life, even though they experience temporary biological death for a short season.
Yeah, I don't find that to be a natural idea. I don't find death as a punishment to be a natural idea. So I would dispute that line of thinking with the death as a natural punishment for not living up to your highest standards. I think that's ridiculous. So even with nations that have death penalties, it's the highest punishment. It's not a punishment for just falling short of your own set goals, or even the society's set goals. You have to go a long ways. There's some very specific things that trigger death as a penalty, and so no, a society would break down completely if it killed everybody for doing, just for the idea of, oh, you did something wrong. So I do think it's an unnatural way of thinking. I think that secular society would never get to a resurrection via the way that you were laying that out. Even if you had time to work on the theme, the theme would die at the first part of it, which is necessary. That death is somehow a natural consequence is not. But what I wanted to interrupt on before was the idea that Judaism had an expectation of resurrection. I think that is a gross overstatement of Judaism. Judaism is not univocal. It's not a singular view. There are lots of Judaisms even in Jesus' day, and we might have even more varieties of it today. We certainly have a lot of it. And when you talk about Daniel, I'm not entirely sure which exile. I believe we're talking about post-exilic work here, but which of the diasporas we're talking about, where some of these ideas enter into Judaism from other places like Assyria and Babylon and Persia. And so the idea that Judaism has always been a religion of resurrections, I think, is demonstrably false. When in the Garden of Eden, the punishment was death. The redemption was not resurrection. And they still went on to live hundreds of years. After that, when when we get Abraham, and the promises made to Abraham, the promise wasn't to Abraham that he would live forever. The promise was that there were certain aspects of the promise that were forever, but note, none of the promises had to do with the Jews living forever. Had to do mostly with the nation being a forever thing. A nation can be forever without any particular person in it living forever. And when we're talking about Jewish promises and Jewish expectations, it's written from the perspective of national interest and not individual interest. And so we don't see anyone having an expectation of living forever in Abraham's day, in Moses' day. That's not a part of it. Disobey me, you sin, obey me, and you'll live forever is not a part of it. It's not a part of any expectation. So you have to go a long ways before you find some talk about that could be remotely identified as resurrection ideation. And even then, I would say some of that resurrection talk is not resurrection of individuals, but resurrection of a nation that had at that point already fallen, had already been ground to dust. And so they're not saying that Joe over there is going to come out of the ground with a new body. They're saying that Israel will rise again. And so by the time that we get to Jesus, we definitely know that there are some sects of Jews that believed in resurrection. So I'm not denying that there weren't some sections of Jews that believed in resurrection much the way we do today. But that is not all of Judaism, and it's fairly late Judaism. And so I think that sometimes we read Jewish text and we read resurrection into it where it is not, and we fail to identify maybe where it started. So it's a little bit more complicated than I think you're making it out to be.
No, it's not. It's perfectly clear. Daniel chapter 12. You just have to read the Bible. The Bible's teaching is all that matters. I don't care about Jewish opinion from one sect to another. All that is just muddying the waters. That's you inserting confusion where none such exists. So all we have to do is read the Bible. If you
I've
say
read Ecclesiastes. You're
have you read
once
Daniel
again,
12?
you're
Okay.
many times you're overstating a thing, and I think that pretty much any scholar on this subject would agree with me that it wasn't the whole time of Judaism. It wasn't all branches of Judaism, and it's very hard to trace the beginnings of it and to the extent that it spread. And so there are times when we can say resurrection was definitely an idea, and there are times when we can say resurrection definitely was not an idea. So you can talk Daniel all you want. I'll talk Ecclesiastes. We don't solve it that way, but I think that what it would show is that the more measured approach that I'm taking is correct.
Yeah, so the idea of a progression, I've studied this in depthly. This was one of my negative evidences against Christianity before I was a Christian, right? And it was one of the ones that I said succeeded. So I agree with you there. In Abraham's day, he didn't know about the resurrection, future resurrection hope. Their hope was in having children and that God would somehow redeem creation, take death and make life of it, and redeem the creation from all sin somehow. But they didn't have a concrete, okay, does that mean there's a resurrection? They haven't put the pieces together, and God has not explicitly revealed that until later in the prophets during the time of Daniel. So again, we still have it's crystal clear, but it's true there was a progression where people before the later prophets didn't necessarily have a crystal clear view of what the afterlife would be. They knew they would be living. There was an afterlife. I would take issue with your Ecclesiastes. You're using a genre of text that's just irrelevant and not literal. But it's correct that, yeah, Abraham, Moses, they wouldn't be like, oh yeah, we're going to have a resurrection and stuff like that, a glorious resurrection. They just knew somehow they were going to continue on with the new heavens and new earth being redeemed, sin done away with and defeated, and death would no longer be an issue, kind of thing. That's what they knew and taught. That's what they hoped for. And they knew that that hope would be realized through their children. And this is why childbirth is so important for these people and stuff, and having that seed come through as the Messiah. So yes, there's a progression. So what? That doesn't deny the fact that resurrection from a Jewish perspective is the hope. Again, it culminates in Daniel 12. Everybody admits there's progressive revelation. So what? That doesn't disprove anything. Yeah, and I don't think you mentioned anything from the secular worldview. Obviously, that is a weakness kind of thing, but I just, like I can't prove the fall happened through secular means. There are some propositions that Christians only get through divine revelation and stuff like that. So that's why I'm sort of struck. Can I obviously, how am I going to prove that the fall happened? That's just impossible, other than just pointing to the world and saying it's not ideal. Even Brian admits good life is better than death. Brian with an I is in the comments. So this is just something that's properly basic. I think we would all admit that a good life is better than death. So something's wrong with this world because people die. So let's forget about linking it to sin and stuff like that. I don't think I can do that apart from just saying, well, see, the Bible says so, and this is divine revelation, and I can prove it's divine revelation by proving the resurrection or something like that. But I think I can prove on secular grounds that good life is better than death. So is there a solution?
Well, that assumes that death is a problem, and death is simply a process of this evolved world. It's a process, not a problem. There are good deaths, and there are bad deaths. I think that bad deaths it'd be nice if we could avoid those altogether. But the reason I start with Judaism is because you can read most of Judaism as live a good life. God is going to give you a good long life on this earth, and then you die well. That was the expectation. That wasn't a problem. And that would be a good thing for us today, I think, if we had a good lives and good long productive lives, and then we die well. That would be a victory.
Okay. Why wouldn't it be even better to have good long, not just long, put it this way, why if having a good life is so good, why not have a good longer life?
But that's just wish fulfillment.
For 5 years, wouldn't that be better?
But no, I hope you don't take offense to this, but that's just kind of childish wish fulfillment. Why does this ice cream have to run out? It's so good. Why does my day at the park have to end? It's so good. And so I understand. Well,
But
okay,
so
well,
long as you can continue maintain enjoying it so that it doesn't turn into something bad along the way, then
well, we're
why
just
isn't it
dealing with the
valid?
reality. We're dealing with the reality of humanity and the universe. And so, if your entire religious basis is a denial of death cult, as I often call Christianity, it's a salve for emotionally immature people who cannot stand the existential dread of one day it comes to an end. I can't help you. You can make up anything you want to. I can't stop that. I don't have to. I don't really have to interact with it in an intellectual manner.
Well, you
Um,
do though, because sorry, I'm interrupting, but like, yeah.
well, look, I've told you many times, I like the interrupting Dale because that's the Dale that gives a shit. That's the fired up Dale. So,
Yeah, it's okay. So look, all you're doing right now, you're just begging the question in favor of this dreary atheistic worldview where, yeah, we die and that's it, grow up and deal with it. But you can't just assert that's reality. That's the whole point of why we're here debating that. And I'm saying, no, it's not reality. And I think that most people, including yourself, and this is why you want to dismiss it as a childish thing when it's not, if we could extend the good life, right? So you can't appeal to, well, if it lasts too long, it's going to turn bad or something like that. I'm just trying to
I
get you
didn't
to
appeal to
agree to
that.
the point. So long as we can extend a good life, that's better, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
I think that whatever human bodies can manage, and I'm not one who believes that we have maximized what the potential of the human body. I think we're getting better at it, but I don't think that we've maximized it. So it could be that a maximized human body over the course of evolution and science might be 200 years. We can do 100 fairly routinely, and I don't think we're close to maximizing what could be done. So,
the Bible says we could last 900 years potentially.
well, okay, but
Take that
I,
literally.
and other storybooks say that you can last forever. Look, I don't, or you download into a machine. Darren has spent his whole life building machines out of spare Dale parts. Um, it's not going to be a good life, Darren. You should have went. You should have went HP. But
Okay,
anyway,
okay. But
Don't judge
so
me.
I'm glad that so we on secular grounds we at least accept that principle and we have a dispute on the facts, right? So okay, how long can a good life be maintained? I might say eternity, someone might say 900 years, you might say, well, maybe 5 more years and that's it, or something. So that we at least agree on in terms of the value that a good life in principle, a good life being lived is better than death. And the more of that good life you can have,
right.
that the better.
But
So
we can approach that in a reality kind of way, or we can approach it in a fantasy kind of way. And the fantasy kind of way says, "Oh, it already exists. All you got to do is, have these beliefs or this or that." So once again, if you're gonna do the fantasy thing, you can say anything you want. There's nothing that can be, there's no serious interaction, I think, that could be made with that. But if you want to talk about a good long life in the real world, I think there are lots of levers we can pull.
okay, great. Okay, so let's look at this factual question then. How long does the good life last? So that it is an undeniable fact that everyone, including Darren Lute, would agree with that every human being dies, unless they're, I don't know if you're going to point to like Elijah or exceptions. There are a couple of exceptions in the Bible, yes, but even those guys, they're going to die because they have to rise. So they're going to, in order to rise from the dead before Judgment Day, they have to die, right? So their death is just very, very delayed, kind of thing. But we all agree the facts are reality is everybody dies. They have a finite period of time in this state that they're in right now. So that's reality. We can agree with that. Next, before I'm getting to resurrection, maybe the next step is, well, can we prove that there is life, but in a different mode? Is there an afterlife? that could be considered an extension of the good life. So I have a good life in my pre-death body kind of thing in this world. Okay, then I die, and do I continue on to exist in any way that could be a good life? And I might point to certain evidence from near-death experience, vertical near-death experiences that point to the fact that our consciousness can and does survive, in certain cases, survive biological or sorry, clinical death, where our physically we are dead. Our brain waves are done and our heart waves are done. We are dead, and this is for an extended period of time. But yet our consciousness is still living. It's still observing things. It's still taking note of things, and even in some cases traveling distances and noting stuff. And then when they come back to life, they report these details.
So I'm going to rudely cut in and say I'm going to cut short the conversation on astral projection and consciousness. Great. If we had unlimited amounts of time, that would be fantastic. But I've got two more points in this thesis, and I don't.
Okay.
So I'm going to grant whatever you say there, and then give a hard pass because.
Let me just ask this. Ask you this though. Like, if I could establish that, yeah, we have a good afterlife kind of thing, would you agree that, okay, yeah, that would qualify under this principle? Yeah, that would be better than just death in the atheistic sense of just dead.
Well, no, because I wouldn't call it an afterlife. I would just call it life.
Fair enough. Okay, I'll let you continue with your point. So, yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Just for the audience, I got him on that one.
No, you didn't. It's just life, man. This is what I didn't want to go there. If there is some other plane of life that we have after shedding these skins, we didn't die. We just transitioned. It's just life. And so there is no afterlife if you don't die. Can't be done. And so I know the reason we have terms like afterlife is because we recognize that death is the end. And so we're just trying to find some way to make it not the end. And that's where fantasy comes in. Once again, I think science and technology can weigh in on that, and you can have a realistic, rational conversation about it. But, eating the right cracker and saying the right prayer is way beyond the scope of a rational conversation about the bounds of human life. So that said, point number two. Point number two, the uniqueness of the resurrection of Jesus. There are some aspects of the Jesus resurrection that I think Christians tend not to examine and not to care about, not to notice. Part of that, if I just have to be as straightforward as I can be, it's because they don't read their Bibles. They just don't know. They don't realize the range of resurrection stories and the things that happen in those stories. And so they don't see the oddities of the Jesus resurrection. So I just want to mention three of those. I'm not going to probably have time to go and read my favorite resurrection. But anyway, so one of the oddities is that nobody saw it. No one saw the resurrection. And by seeing the resurrection, there are questions you could ask like, well, do you actually have to be there looking at the dead body and then watch the eyes open and watch him unwrap the shroud? Is that what you mean by seeing? Well, that would help. But no, mostly what I mean by seeing is you saw him be put in a tomb and you saw him walk out of the tomb, kind of like the Lazarus story. He was dead. There were people who saw it. He was placed in a tomb by the people, apparently a popular guy. They were around when he came out of the tomb and walked out. So that would be witnessing a resurrection as far as my criteria of witnessing a resurrection. Other resurrections, possibly all other resurrections, maybe with an exception of my favorite one, were witnessed resurrections. But for Jesus' resurrection, no witnesses. That's a weird thing in the Bible. And so Christians who think that's normal, it's not. It's actually fairly unique, and you have to come up with some reasons why that would be. The second oddity I want to mention is that no one expected it. So even though I said that in the Jewish expectation, resurrection wasn't a big theme, resurrection was also not unheard of either. And so they would know that, for instance, a man of God like an Elijah, they could come to Elijah and say, my boy is sick. Can you, in fact, my boy is dead. He just died. Can you help him? You know, they could expect that someone who's superpowered could do a thing like that. And indeed, someone superpowered could do a thing like that. It wasn't normative. It wasn't a part of the meta story of the Jews, but it was a thing that could happen. You know, it's like healing a blind person. They expected that these superpowered people could do that sort of thing, that it was a thing that God could do if you appealed to God or one of God's people. In Jesus' time, the centurion comes to Jesus, my daughter, she's sick. And then someone gives a message, no, she's dead, never mind. And the man says, hey, can you do something anyway? There's an expectation that it's possible to do. So we see that expectation kind of throughout, even with Jesus. But when Jesus died, despite his disciples being with him and maybe even participating in some raising of the dead themselves, having seen it, possibly done it, when Jesus dies, not one of them had the expectation that he was going to rise. In fact, not only did they not have the expectation, nobody tried to do it. Nobody said, hey, you remember that time when we raised that dead girl? Let's try that. No one tried. No one expected it could happen. The people who followed him, the people who heard him talk, the people who heard him imply, yeah, I'm gonna die in 3 days and rise again. No one was keeping a vigil at the tomb to see if he would walk out. Nobody was trying to do it. I doubt anybody was praying for it. The Bible doesn't give us that kind of story. 0 people expected it. That's odd. That's an oddity in this story that needs explanation. We need better headcanon. And then the last one that I'll mention is the doubt tradition, which is a big deal. Nobody believed it. So if you look at all, and I mean all, of the other resurrections in the Bible, we've got about 10 plus the zombie uprising, maybe 9 plus the zombie uprising, kind of depends on how you count. We've got a lot of resurrections there. Old Testament, New Testament, during Jesus' ministry, post-Jesus ministry, Jesus off the scene, we have a couple of resurrections in Acts. Resurrections are a fairly common theme. All right, I believe, I'm going to say this without having checked in a long time, we have more resurrection stories than we do have healing of the blind stories in the Bible. So from that perspective, kind of common. And every one of the resurrection stories we have, there is no doubt tradition. There's no one saying, no, that person really didn't rise from the dead. No, we don't believe that. No one saw the resurrection. No, he looks like somebody else. No, it's just accepted. Flat out. No traditions of doubt. You take all of the people who saw Jesus, not one of them immediately believed. Not the women. Oh, he's the gardener. Not the guys on the road to Emmaus who obviously knew of Jesus, maybe walked with him at some point as disciples. They didn't buy it. It just didn't occur to them that Oh, Jesus, is that you? You rose. Cool. No, didn't occur to them. His disciples, his freaking inner circle, walks in the room where they're hiding in fear, and he says, "Hello, boys." And they're afraid because they think he's some kind of phantasm. Nobody believes he rose. And so we have to go into all of these special proofs of resurrection, things like that, that are completely absent in the Bible for any other resurrection tradition. We get this very weird doubt tradition with the Jesus resurrection. So these three things would make up my number two of uniquenesses of the resurrection of Jesus. Just a recap. No one saw it. No one expected it. No one believed it. Dale? And we've got one more after this. So
Yeah,
let's try to bear that in mind.
And don't forget you're a king, God die kind of thing. But so perfect. I can answer this with one answer and answer all three things. Look, the only way somebody would see this as odd is if they don't know the gospel message, which I know David does. So that wasn't a slight against him, but I think he's pretending not to. You're missing religious context, and this is what answers. Look, why were they not expecting? Because nobody expected a crucified Messiah to raise from the dead. Yes, they witnessed Jesus having supernatural powers and raising people like Lazarus, right? Tabitha happened afterwards, but they witnessed Lazarus. So, well, couldn't he raise himself? Not if he's a crucified Messiah, proven to be, again, according to their false understanding, a false Messiah. God would not allow any satanic servant like a crucified Messiah to raise themselves from the dead. Of course, they weren't expecting it. God had just falsified all of Jesus' claims from their perspective. So they weren't, that's why they weren't at the tomb. As to no one witnessed it, again, begging the question biasly for atheism, because as far as I know, God the Father and the Holy Spirit witnessed it, perhaps even a couple of angels. But God and the Holy Spirit, and it's the Holy Spirit that just so happens to testify and produce properly basic beliefs within the early disciples about the resurrection. So we do have at least two witnesses to the resurrection event, kind of thing. But as to why there were no human witnesses, again, they weren't expecting a resurrection. Who would expect a crucified Messiah to rise? Lazarus wasn't a crucified Messiah. Tabitha wasn't a crucified Messiah. So that is why Jesus is special. Again, why he's the first fruits, that religious context. And that also explains why there would be doubters, because some people would be saying, what the heck? A crucified Messiah, and he's actually appearing before my eyes? I just can't believe that like that. No, God falsified you on the cross. How are you here? You must be a ghost or something. Whereas in the other cases, a religious agent that they had no reason to doubt at the time was present in Jesus' case for Lazarus, and he was using supernatural powers to heal him. To raise Lazarus from the dead and resuscitate him. No reason to doubt that. I'm seeing it with my own eyes, and it's all making sense with my theology. Yep, Jesus is God's Messiah, and the Messiah is raising Lazarus from the dead. It all checks out. After with Tabitha, okay, the Apostle Peter is in town, and we know the resurrection's true, and therefore Peter is an agent of God, and he's healing Tabitha. Yep, it all checks out. It makes sense with my Christian theology. So there's no reason to doubt. But only in Jesus' case, where the concept of a crucified Messiah was so bewildering, so embarrassing, as even Dr. Bart Ehrman, the atheist scholar, will admit. This is why it would cause people to be doubtful and wondering what the heck is going on. It would take a second to register with them what's going on, that this is God actually vindicating Jesus. So
let me just give a brief rebuttal of that, and then you can have the last word on that. We'll go to the next thing on the list. I think that your very easy rebuttal is rebutted by an even easier rebuttal, but he did it. Okay, so you're treating the resurrections that Jesus did. You're treating the whole story as if it's just a fictional story. This is not good for you because the people are not responding the way humans would respond in a situation like that. So the disciples may have thought he was the Messiah, and that's why he could do the dead raising stuff. But it does not matter whether they were right about him being a Messiah because he was still a guy who raised dead people in front of their eyes. They were still people who raised dead people. It still happened. And so they would maybe question, well, maybe he wasn't a Messiah, maybe something else. But what you would have to be saying is that they were then in doubt of whether he actually raised dead people at all. What maybe it was some kind of trick. And that would then suggest that we're just dealing with stories. But if we're not just dealing with stories and we're dealing with, they have the wrong idea of a Messiah, it would be like me. I don't care. I don't care if Dale is the Christian Messiah. He raised dead people and he said he was going to rise. He was killed. He's going to rise. He did the raising. He gave me the power to raising. So I'm going to go with that. I'm not going with some theological construct that doesn't matter. He's a man who could raise dead people, and he gave you the power to raise dead people, and all of a sudden you just forget all of that because your theological ideas were tweaked a little bit. So what?
My response is equally simple. This is just anachronistic nonsense, and you're kind of putting your own mindset. Maybe this is the way you think as a modern day atheist, but nobody back in time thought that, especially the Jews and their theology. It makes perfect
I would
sense.
argue yes, they would, because
Well, I got the last word, right? So
well, okay, you can have the last word after I interrupt your last word. All right, but the problem, once again, you said this earlier. You can retract it if you like, but you were saying that they were thinking, well, obviously God wouldn't raise up or allow the power to raise up for a false Messiah. But if he was a false Messiah, God wouldn't have allowed him to go around raising the dead in the first place. So but God did allow him to go around raising the dead, and God did allow them to be taught by the man who went around raising the dead. And so again, you're still stuck with the problem with whatever your theological issue is. He did it.
Okay, so this is why you've got to let me finish, right? Because the Pharisees witnessed this. Jesus did it, but yet, they don't believe he's the Messiah, right? So obviously their theology allowed for satanic counterfeit miracles. So just witnessing a supernatural event, I get for you as a modern day atheist, this would be the radical earth shaking event. But for them at the time, given their theology and the different allowances, a supernatural act in and of itself is not the be all and end all of proof kind of thing, right? They would go, I guess at the time it made sense to them, right? They had no reason to doubt because Jesus wasn't crucified at that time. After he'd been crucified, that's when the doubts would come, and they would be wondering, maybe they reflected back, he raised Lazarus. He must have done it through the power of Satan, just like the Pharisees say, and the Sadducees were telling us. I guess they were right. That's what a normal human being would be thinking, given their theological mindset at the time. So it's just not the case that it would be, but he rose Jesus from the dead, so I can't doubt. Of course he is going to rise. No, that for all they know, it was some kind of satanic trick. And
Hail Satan! What are you talking about? If somebody rose my dead wife, who is not dead, but my dead wife from the grave, and it turns out that he wasn't the Jewish Messiah, but he was some satanic entity, hail Satan! I'm going to raise my wife up because he gave me the power to do it, and I'll just be a different kind of person. I don't know what the issue would be.
He is, but he's not. It's not that he is from Satan. Remember, we're talking about the false mindset of these people, kind of thing. They had this false belief, kind of thing. But in hindsight, we know as Christians know that they were wrong. A crucified Messiah can be risen from the dead, and that, in fact, that's his whole point. That's his whole mission. But I'm just talking about from the mindset of these flawed disciples in the moment. it makes perfect sense because they had this false belief, and that's why there would be doubts and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
yeah, we're not saying that it actually was Satan that Jesus power, used
Yeah.
to raise Lazarus from the dead. That's
Yeah.
not the point.
I get that. I'm just saying none of those explanations make sense to me. They make sense to you. You can have them. How long is it going to take before someone clips me saying "Hell, Satan," and that's going to be all I'm remembered for? And who wants to take bets that it's going to be Dale who does it? Let's let's just move on. Dale, how long is it going to take?
I would never include you with a clip show with that heretic apologia. Don't worry.
Okay. All right.
Rabid atheist with his little bunny ears. No.
Okay.
You get a little more respect. So.
Oh, cool. I'll get my own clip show of saying "Hell, Satan." Oh boy. All right. No one could confirm it later. This is my last point here, and oh no, wait. I'm sorry. No one. Oh, wait a minute. Move to my. Sorry. I had the thing. Okay, and I did that thing. I think I may have skipped through one of my things. So bad on me. Uniqueness of the resurrection. No one. Okay, so my notes went a little bit awry here, but I'm going to try to put this last thought together. And it has to do with the weirdness of the appearances and ascension. So, right. So I've already touched on some of this. There were no appearances that we read about where someone just believed, which is weird because he's back, baby, and he only appears to people who knew him. So that feels a little bit weird with the appearances story. The ascension story, though, I think is also really, really weird. We have, I think, one other ascension story, the chariot of fire in the Bible, which doesn't, it in and of itself is weird, but it's almost unimportant. With this ascension story, it's surrounded by the weirdness of why. Because what happened with the ascension was that God took away any viable method to have real proof that the resurrection happened. I've got a piece that I'm working on the second coming, and so I'll spill a little bit here, though I don't want to take too much time with it. There's no reason for a second coming. There are zero Jewish expectations of a second coming. They don't know what you mean. If a Messiah had to come and then leave and then come a second time, he's not the Messiah. There were things that the Messiah was supposed to do when he appeared. All right. So the idea of Jesus leaving before the work is done is frankly theologically inexplicable. It's humanly explainable because Jesus didn't do anything. And the thing that Jesus is supposed to do is something that we should be able to visibly see, things that physically happen in the world that make physical changes. Well, none of that happened. And so we can say he came and did all the spiritual work, but he's going to come back later and do all the physical stuff that we can see. That is not the expectation of any Messiah. And so what we do by getting rid of the Messiah, by getting him off the scene, is we cast doubt on whether he's actually a Messiah. Even if all of the other things you say happened, getting him back up to heaven torpedoes all that. Well, this can't be the Messiah because he's ascended. So theologically, it's a problem, but just humanly, it's a problem because there's no need to. If he needs to prepare a place for us because human bodies are now going to be in heaven, they got to put in the plumbing. Heaven's a pretty big mess because from the beginning of time, heaven should have been prepared for that. So it doesn't actually make any sense that Jesus would have to go and prepare a place for anybody, theologically, for a God who knows exactly what's going to happen and when and how, all that. He unlike all of the other people who were raised, and you can say that they were resuscitated and they died later, we have no evidence that they died again. It is appointed unto man once to die, and after this judgment. It's just headcanon that says all the people raised died again. We never have a story or a hint, for that matter, that they died again. And so presumably people would have been around who could ask them questions. Possibly why there's no doubt tradition. The story is simply not written for there to be a doubt tradition because they're still here. Jesus leaves fairly quickly, shows himself to relatively few, suspiciously people who already believe. I know we're talking about, we're going to get a conversation about James, the brother of Jesus, and all that I think is fairly irrelevant. By and large, the people who already believed him were already kind of in the club, and such, and then he leaves. And so what we can't do is we can't validate it. We're left to look at empty tombs and dirty cloths of suspicious origin and things like that. But you know what we could do if Jesus was still here? We could see the man who's been alive for 2,000 years and not really have any questions about that. For every generation, he can do a few miracles on TV, for Pete's sake, or whatever means of proof that we have at that time. Really couldn't say anything about that. The only thing that would be left is for people to decide, well, do I want to follow this guy or not? And there would still be room for people to not want to follow this guy. So the fact that he ascended the way he did actually is more of a problem for the resurrection story than almost any other issue about the resurrection. And there are all kinds of problems, and this is a big one without a good explanation. That said, I'm pretty sure that Dale is going to try to come up with a good explanation for why Jesus rose, left without doing anything, and left us with no viable evidence that anything else is going to happen except a vague promise that he's going to come back again one day and finish the job. So with that, I am done with the argument that I'm able to make today. We didn't get to talking about first fruits, so just 3 seconds on first fruits. First fruits is theological nonsense. Once again, it's just rhetoric. It's a cope. It's not first fruits until there's a second fruit, at the very least, and we don't see that. And so you can have at it, Dale.
Okay. So I'll start with this, just to be humorous. So David says, well, there's no evidence that these people, resuscitators, ever died again. So therefore, I guess David's assuming that they didn't. For all we know, they're still walking around to this day. Great. There's no mention. Skeptics love to say that there's no mention of the martyrdoms of the 12. So I guess they're still alive today. I get Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo. They're mentioned in Julius Caesar, but they never mentioned their death. So I guess they're still alive today. No, just the natural thing is, yeah, people will naturally die, and we know that kind of thing when they're normal. And since the Bible's clear that none of the resuscitations were a part of the resurrected proper class, because only Jesus was, we have no reason to think any of them are living still on earth or in heaven immortally or something like that.
It's a made-up distinction. I wanted to get that in so that you could comment on it, because I think I did say something in the writing. And so while you're talking about that, resuscitation versus real resurrection is a made-up distinction, not in the Bible. It's headcanon. So saying it doesn't make it so.
But it's not made up. It's right there because the Bible says it's first fruits. So therefore, it's proof. They think Jesus' resurrection is something different. And it's also explicitly connected to what's called the resurrection at the end of the age, when
it doesn't explain first fruits of what or how it's first fruits. So once again, all of that's headcanon.
It does. It tells it's the first fruits in terms of the fully redeemed resurrected body, free of sin, the effects of sin, Whereas resuscitations, you continue on to be plagued by and corrupted by the sin disease, and therefore you die. Whereas this, you're free from the effects of sin, including death. You're not going to die again. So yeah, right there, the Bible's pretty clear as to what first fruits are. All right, and he's other objection. He only appears to people he knows. Well, first of all, no. How do you prove that? You can prove every single member of the 500, including their wives and perhaps even
I
children
don't believe
who
in the
would not have
500.
been included in the 500.
Yeah, I don't, I
Um,
don't, I don't believe in the 500. So once again, I'm
but
not trying to
but
interrupt.
what?
I'm just trying to say at the
Yeah,
places where you're
okay,
talking
okay.
about it. So you can talk about the 500, not included. I think it's BS.
Okay, but can you, okay, but unless you can prove that Jesus didn't appear to the 500 as a historical fact on a balance of probabilities, you can't say that you can't make your claim that he only appeared to people he knows. Because if he did appear to 500 and you can't disprove that, that may include people he didn't know.
I can talk about the
First,
narrated stories of it. And so if you want to narrow down my claim to the stories that are narrated in the Gospels, great. The fan the
you gotta let
fanfic
me
of
finish my
Paul,
4 minutes.
uh,
Okay,
I do not count.
there's Paul as well. Oh, how convenient. So your claim only works if you conveniently leave out the people that he doesn't know, like Paul. No one, yeah, of course, I can make that claim too. He only appears to people that he knows. Just ignore the people that he doesn't know.
Well,
That's
I
my
said
claim.
the narrated stories of the appearances, and so
I'm trying
uh,
to be a smart aleck. So
no. I mean, I just want people to understand what I'm talking about and the distinction that I make. And anyone who knows me and heard me talk over the years knows darn well why I don't include Paul. But I just don't want to take up the time here to do that because that would be a true derailing of your point. And I'm just trying to
well, here's the
I'm trying to
main
help you focus on the thing that I'm really talking about.
Okay, so here's the main point that I'm trying. Jesus didn't purposefully only appear to people he knows. He appeared only to the people who he knew would be saved as a result and would serve his ultimate purpose of saving as many free will creatures as possible in his providence. So that's how he selected who he would appear to, and that included people that he didn't know, such as the Apostle Paul and the 500. And again, we can dispute that kind of thing, but it didn't matter. The point that I'm making is it doesn't matter whether he knew you or not. It mattered what would you be saved in response, and therefore play a role in preaching the gospel, spreading the gospel message to save as many free will creatures as possible. Now, your second point, show me. Oh, shoot, comes one. Oh, okay. So, why does Jesus? Oh, okay. So you say that the Messiah has to come once, not twice. So
Yeah,
I would just say, great, prove it. Show me a single explicit Old Testament verse that says the Messiah will only come once, not twice.
because
If
it
you
talks
can't
about
show
the
me
things
that,
that the
just
Messiah would do when he came. And if
wait.
Jesus doesn't do any of those things, then he's not it.
Oh, but he will do it in the future, right? So
Then he
nowhere
will
does
be the
it.
Messiah, but he's not the Messiah right now.
No, because if the Messiah has to complete only the first phase of the mission at time one and then completes the rest at time two, that's consistent with what the messianic prophecies say, right? So
Nope.
you're reading into the text an interpretation that hasn't been proven here that the Messiah has to accomplish all at T2, or you're saying, well, he has to accomplish at least the visible things like taking over the Romans and the king at time one. But there are, if we look at the prophecies themselves, nowhere does it assign time indicators to specific phase prophecies related to the messianic thing. So like
Okay, then
you
from that perspective, there could be a second coming, third coming, 10th coming, 100th coming. At some point,
except
at some
except the
point, it
New
gets
Testament.
absurd.
Well, except that the New Testament tells us everything will be completed at his second coming, because that's when the new heavens and the new earth will come,
Mhm.
and the rest is all completed. So you have to
Conveniently pushed
find.
away, I would just say that the Jews who, who created the idea of Messiah. That is no part of their idea. But I think that we're talking in circles there. So yeah, that's my response to that. But you can continue to claim, well, it's possible. Okay.
Okay, now you made a fourth claim, and because you
Uh,
kept interrupting me, I've forgotten it. Do you
yeah, no,
remember?
I get it. Much apologies.
Okay.
Well, there were two others. Proof of his resurrection went up in the clouds with him, and then the last thing that I said very quickly, it is actually in the notes, is that you can't call a thing first fruits without there being a second fruits, and so again, it's just coping rhetoric until you prove it, and it hasn't happened.
Okay, so in terms of the ascension, don't forget he was replaced by the Holy Spirit, which is the ultimate proof. It's way better. This is what gives you direct, properly basic beliefs as subjective evidence for the truth of the resurrection, and that's way better, as the Doubting Thomas story tells us, compared to having Jesus physically there, because there are certain benefits that come about from the Holy Spirit spreading knowledge about the gospel and attesting to the truth of the gospel, because again, he was a witness of the resurrection. He was in the tomb as an omnipresent person, divine person, stuff like that. So I would say, yeah, the Bible itself says this explicitly, that it's better, even better, to have the Holy Spirit, Jesus go, and then the Holy Spirit take over and fulfill his role. Much more people would be saved as a result of that. So yeah, that's the Christian answer to that. Um, your other, very quickly,
First
your
fruit,
last
second
one,
fruit.
first fruits, second fruit. Um, okay, so this is, yeah, that's not logically coherent here. You don't need to have the actualization of the second fruit before you can say somebody is the first fruit. Of course, I could be, before somebody's that's like saying, oh, well, before there was a second person to travel to the Arctic. Oh, the first person never made it to the Arctic. There was no such thing as the first person who made it to the Arctic, or was the first person. I guess, Buzz Armstrong, you've just taken away their things, right? Because if
No,
there was
you
this,
no. So I understand where you're thinking here.
uh,
I thought about this in advance. In that case, it would be the only person. It would be this person is unique in character, in action. But when you say he's the first of, then you're talking about at least two. And so it's proper to say at one point this was the only guy who ever walked on the moon. But I think we could have seen and envisioned going back to the moon in other countries, going back to the moon, and other people walking on the moon. So I think it's fine to say the first person to walk on the moon. Uh, Jesus is specifically theologically called the first fruit, not the only one who rises this way. I could argue further that they were expecting the general resurrection very, very quickly. That didn't happen, but that's not a part of my argument today. I'm just saying that until someone else does it, he's not the first fruit of anything.
but okay, so I was about to say, like, okay, I disagree with you, but I get what your argument is now. But did you just say that when the first landing on the moon took place, you still could say, yes, they were the first to do so in light of envisioning future visitors coming from China
Yes.
or America? Okay,
Yes.
so then your argument still fails, because the same thing applies to Jesus. Just because that you consider moon landing a plausible thing and resurrection's not, I mean, that's irrelevant to the point. Like,
Right, but
logically.
it's just cope though at that point. I don't think that anyone was trying to cope with some failing by saying, the first astronauts step foot on the moon were the first. Okay, I think that there was good reason to say it that way. But for the Christian, we've got this thing that we can't prove because he left too quickly. and they just want to say, but it's going to happen again. And it's one of those categories, Dale, where this is where I'm kind of hardest on Christianity and religion in general. It's when the proof of a thing becomes, well, you know it when you die. Okay, well, you're done. We're just done. If all you've got for me is, well, you'll understand hell when you die. Have a nice day, right? And so if the only evidence that Christians can ever offer for the second fruit is, well, it'll happen when all of history is over, you'll know when you die. It's just kind of coping wish fulfillment, and we don't have
Yeah,
any
I mean,
reason to believe it.
so barring, well, we have reason, but not a reason you would accept. But so if you're saying, put it this way, if you're saying we have no secular reasons outside of divine, involving divine revelation. If you give me divine revelation, it's in there. We have good reason to believe it and place our hope in it, right? That's what faith is all about. I'm trusting that Jesus is going to fulfill his promises and stuff like that. That's where we actually do need faith because there's no evidence. We can't see the future and stuff like that. So on that front, if you take away divine revelation, yeah, I can't prove a future event would take place any more than you could prove anyone would land, that someone will land on Mars, right? Maybe that'll never take place. Who knows? We may have a zombie
And
apocalypse
this
for
is
all you
where we would
know.
just have to say, I have to punt by saying, insert everything that I have said to date, if you've heard it, or imagine the show that and extremely long article that I can do on the expectation of recency, uh, of imminence. I'm sorry.
Okay.
There's a great expectation of imminence, and you can, I think, reasonably, maybe not perfectly, use an expectation of imminence argument to say that we actually don't have good faith reasons to believe it because they thought it was going to be a lot sooner. They thought that they were going to see people coming out of the ground in their lifetime in this new resurrection, but it didn't happen for them. It didn't happen for the next generation. It didn't happen in the next generation, and it's just, well, checks in the mail, and you'll get it when you die.
Yeah, so well, I wish you wouldn't throw me out. I had an important point to raise. It's just gone now. So I'll just
You,
have to,
you'll have
I guess.
chances to get back at me. I mean, I don't mean to. I'm not trying to be evil, Dale. I'm trying to respond at the moments that the responses matter, so that while you're making the point, you can incorporate or at least redirect to the thing that I'm actually saying, as opposed to making a straw
Can
man
you?
argument.
Okay, so but on the imminence thing, you explicitly said that was not you're not going to raise that. So that's
I
why I
did
wasn't
say that I'm
responding.
not going to raise that.
But since you've raised it and I've forgotten what I was talking about before, I'll just raise, I guess I'll just address it that it is true that I think the earliest church, including the apostles like Paul, had a false belief about the imminent of the second coming extremely early, kind of thing, with in some cases within their lifetimes. And as scripture, even inspired scripture, even tells us, right, that um, Paul was mistaken on that front, and he had to change his mind between the writing of First and Second Thessalonians, was it? Where he kind of hints around, like, yeah, actually, I thought it was going to come when I was still alive, but now it looks like I'm going to die, kind of thing, before that comes. And that, again, there's no contradiction in inspired scripture or any authoritative, divinely authoritative inspired statements or in Jesus' teachings. Jesus tells us, you ignorant fools, I want you to live like it's an imminent, right? Because you never know when it's going to come. And this is why every generation of Christian, rightly so, thinks the end is coming and they live as though the end is coming in their time. But the problem is when they start making dogmatic statements, oh, I know this is the end of the world. Well, there's probably another 1,000 years ahead of you, buddy, just to make you look like a fool because you never say that. Nobody knows the day or the time of when it's coming. So don't make dogmatic statements. But yet, every generation of Christian, I want you to live as though it's imminent, as though it's coming, kind of thing. So And that's what all that Jesus teaches us in terms of the imminence of the second coming. He wants us to always be prepared, and he even gives us that parable expressing that point, kind of thing. But when flawed human beings, speak presumptuously, that's when problems come, and that's when we get egg on our face. So that's why we should never pronounce the end's coming tomorrow. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard, you're going to see it, buddy. It's time for Judgment Day on Apologia. No, we can't do that. That's when we make the mistake.
Okay, look, I said it was, maybe a
Thought you
weak
were gonna laugh.
argument. No, so here's the thing. I can make it a strong argument. I don't want this discussion, though, to be the only thing that people remember and talk about is the imminence argument. So I will talk about that in the comments. Everything's open game in the comments, but so needless to say, I disagree with your characterization on that. Maybe imminence deserves an entire article and show, but just not this one. So I'm willing to walk away from it. I only mentioned imminence as a possible defense of my claim at some point, but that's great. So what I would like to do at this point, because as everyone knows, there is a strong tradition of opening statements and closing statements, and I would like to skip the closing statements. And the only reason I would like to skip the closing statements is not because we don't have things to say, but because you have a limited amount of time, and I really want to talk about a dead God and bring the other people into the discussion. And I think that's far more important than us capping out our thoughts here. So what I would say as a close to this discussion is I really appreciate you coming around and discussing the idea. I hope it kicks off further conversation. I would also say that what I would have done if this was a debate and I were debating the other side of my thesis, I would say, yeah, great. I grant all of it because you're me, I'm the great grantor. I would just grant all of my points and say, yeah, that still doesn't mean the resurrection didn't happen. It just means it was weird in some ways. Great. I agree. Big deal. So I would have, because there's nothing that I say that would lead to the conclusion, therefore the resurrection didn't happen. I think the best outcome from my challenge to the resurrection is to make Christians who have an unexamined faith examine it, who have unquestioned beliefs about weird things they believe to question and look for themselves. And people who are on the bubble and are more realistic focused, you can have very reality focused Christianity out there. Those people would look at this and say, I haven't thought about it in that way. And you're right, that really doesn't make any sense. There's less reason to believe this than I had before. Great. I think that's the best that my thesis could do, but I think it can do that powerfully. So I wouldn't even spend a lot of time arguing against the ideas. I also don't think there are very many ideas that you can reasonably argue against. But such that there might be, I think you did a good job in responding to them, and I appreciate your participation.
No problem. Happy to be here to be your foil, Christian foil, I think, like I said, resurrection is the most important, essential and central doctrine of Christianity. Without it, we're still in our sins. Christianity's meaningless. There's no point in anything, kind of thing. So I hope that I was able to provide that understanding. There's a reason why 3/4 of the Gospels are or something like that. So Craig Keener did some kind of calculation where the vast bulk of the Gospels are focused on the passion, the week in Jerusalem and the passion and resurrection of Jesus. It's more important than anything else. All the other, his 3 years of ministry and stuff like that are much more condensed, much more summarized, so that the gospel writers could focus. And again, they had limited space. It was very expensive and hard to get papers to write these stories on. They had to put considerable thought into, okay, what am I going to spend the most time describing? And for them, it was clear. It was that gospel bookends of, the death and the resurrection. That's what they chose to spill the most ink on, and they did that for a reason. So the resurrection is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I think with these abnormalities, what it does for me is make it look like this is a theological story. This is not a historical event. There are reasons why they wrote the story this way. There are reasons why it had to be this way, but it doesn't make any sense as things that happened in reality. I hinted that I might get around to some of the reasons why I think they did go with resurrection. You can ask me in the comments, and it'll have to be another thing there. I was prepared to talk about it. I had time permitted. So with that said,
Can I just ask you a quick question, if you
sure.
don't mind?
Yeah.
Just a sincere one, because I'm kind of curious. I know I was hoping to prepare this morning by reading your thing, and because of my internet, I didn't get a chance to do that. But you've mentioned this several times that you kind of wanted me to be proving things on secular grounds rather than giving an internal assessment of the importance of the resurrection and stuff, which is what I thought the show was on. Did you
No,
honestly
you were
expect?
right. No, I wasn't. I wasn't expecting you to address it on secular grounds. I address it on secular grounds because I'm a secularist.
Okay.
And at some point, Christians have to realize they're trying to get secular people to buy a story that more and more, the more you look at it, just looks like a story. It doesn't look like anything that would have happened in reality. And all the kind of resurrection historicity looks worse and worse when you include the kind of data that I'm talking about right now.
Okay.
So I don't expect you to be able to look at it that way, but I expect that people who are hearing my side of this story, it's going to really resonate with people who are not bought into a cult-like religion and story that says, well, this is the reason for resurrection. No, those reasons actually don't matter when you stop and think about it. Those reasons don't make sense when you stop and think about it. And what I want to do is help people stop and think about it. But obviously, that is the story we have. And I do believe I can explain some of why it is the story we have on secular grounds. And I'm prepared to talk about that in the comments.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to ask you, yeah, like if you honestly expected like someone to be able to prove on Bible independent grounds all the claims. So for example, I can prove independently Jesus died. Everybody does that and stuff like that. That's easy. Most scholars agree with it. I know you even disagree with that as a mythicist, but
Yep.
who cares?
But it doesn't
Let's pretend
matter.
that.
It doesn't matter. I
But yeah,
grant
yeah.
it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. But my point is, it's impossible. I have no way apart from the Bible, right? So I can prove on independent grounds that okay, Christianity is true and that the Bible is sufficiently attached and stuff like that. But and therefore all of the doctrines taught in there are true. But outside of that, I can't directly prove Jesus died for our sins. Like just come up with like a secular argument or something totally independent of the Bible. So like I'm just kidding. Do you, as an atheist, do you expect Christians to have to prove every single claim? Like, not just that Jesus died, but he died for our sins. And you have to prove he healed this specific blind guy with mud.
No, no. What I
All in.
what I want them to prove is that the stories make sense.
Okay.
Because I'm arguing more on a sensible ground here. The resurrection is completely unintuitive, and most of the details that are so important to Christians don't make sense. And so you have to, if you're arguing on the balance of probabilities, you know, and you're
I
arguing
got
with
you.
someone who doesn't believe in the resurrection, which is it more likely that Jesus being raised from the dead broke sin and death, or Jesus being raised from the dead did nothing? Well, the thing that's more reasonable is it did nothing because nothing has changed. We are still, in fact, subject to sin and death. So even that theological claim on when posed to a secularist doesn't make sense. It doesn't. You just have to
Gotcha.
by
it's
a
an
bunch of
argument.
propositions, and you can't ask questions, and you can't raise your hand when you say, oh, but that doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does. It fits perfectly. We can
Yeah,
cope with our stuff. Shut up. When
yeah, I
that's
get
the
what
only
you.
answer, right?
Yeah, so I get, yeah, your goal here. You're basically making an argument from incoherence. You're saying
Yes,
it's an internal critique, right? You're saying, given the Christian story and my secular reasoning, that it doesn't make sense, right? You know,
exactly.
and you raise that. Why do you? You can question why is death a punishment? It's not a punishment for anything, and why is? So I get what you were doing. So yeah, okay, cool. And I gave my defeaters for that. So yeah.
Yep. So I think we did good. Again, I appreciate it. Let's go into the after show. Real Seekers, why don't you give your things, where people can find you and what you've got coming out next.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'm Dale the Real Seeker, and you can find me on YouTube. Just type in Real Seekers, or otherwise go to my blog at realseekerministries.wordpress.com. And that's Real Seeker without the S, for the blog. Next up, so hopefully, I don't know if it's going to happen because I haven't got confirmation yet, but hopefully tomorrow I will have Dr. David Kemble Cook versus David Russell on the question of the resurrection. This is an event that I've been waiting for 2 years, so hopefully that will happen, but I'm not sure. Otherwise, you will see me next Friday, the 24th, on the famous Capturing Christianity podcast. I will be debating the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano, and I will be the Protestant skeptic. I think it's complete bunk, and this is not proof for Catholic transubstantiation. So Darren Lute will actually be cheering me on for that podcast. So that's what I
For
have coming
once, me,
for once.
Darren, and Dale are in
We agree.
agreement on a theological matter.
Exactly.
This
Yep.
is
The
a world
Eucharistic
premiere.
miracle of Lanciano is not is no,
Well,
it's not
in an
proof.
in an infinite universe, everything's
Oh,
bound to
shut
happen.
up. Let me have my agreement, damn it. That's all.
And just for Brian, because I see he's asking, I've been trying to type it out, but anyways, Brian, I'll just answer you here quickly. Yes, I do see prophecies in the Hebrew scriptures that require the Messiah to be physically resurrected before the end times. Specifically, there, Daniel 9 and Haggai chapter 2, I believe, speak of the Messiah having to die before and therefore resurrect before the second temple is destroyed. And so that implies there's at least a period of 40 years. And as we know now, it's 2,000 years. So, yeah, I would point to prophecies like that that speak of a specific time for the Messiah to die before the second temple was destroyed.
All right. Skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. Discuss skepticsandseekers at gmail.com. Send it in. So rather than being out, did God die? I don't know how much time you have left, Dale, but the reason I'm cutting everything short is to have this conversation, because I think it is an even bigger issue than the main subject here, and it's actually part of my write up. And so it is a problem that I had even when I was a Christian. The resurrection may be the biggest theological problem with the resurrection is that for resurrection to be meaningful, someone has to die. For a resurrection to be real, the death has to be real. For God to be God, he has to be immortal. And the definition of immortal is not die. If God dies, God's not God. There's a very brief summary. I could write 10 pages on it. Everybody's mic should be open now. Did God die?
So, okay, let me answer in a cheeky way. First of all, no, God didn't die because God is defined as the Godhead or the Trinity, and at no time did all three members of God die. So, all three divine persons. So, no is the answer to the simplistic question in a cheeky way.
Okay,
But
we
if
got to swing back around on that one. But I'm look, we've got both the procurator and the emperor and the criminal. And the criminal's mic is the only one that's open. Darren, your understanding of theology, I know this is not your bag. Did God die? Am I right? Is there a problem here?
I don't think there's any definition of die that matches the resurrection story. Jesus basically had a bad weekend in hell and then went back up to heaven.
Okay, but did he die? That's still I can't leave that because he wasn't like sleep in his grave. Dale, back me up.
yeah,
Jesus was running around Sheol preaching to people, whatever the heck that means. So he was alive the whole time doing stuff.
so let me just say this to give you some kind of controversy to speak about. So when it comes to the specific divine person, Jesus, so it makes sense to say part of God, right? Jesus, the divine person, Jesus, he did experience biological death. Okay, biological death. Oh, am I still? What's going on?
You're still here.
I'm
Yeah,
still
we can
here.
hear you.
Okay. Okay, my screen just went white, so I'll just keep speaking while I still can. So biological death, all that means
Dale is seeing the light. The light.
death. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a
I'm
miracle.
Jesus,
It's a miracle.
and you shouldn't be here. I'm sorry. There was a story recently. Go on. Biological death, white light. Go. Forgive me.
I've been muted. Am I back?
You're
Okay.
not muted. Go. I will not
Okay.
interrupt.
Okay. Now, death from a biblical perspective, how is that defined? It's separation, right? So, and this is over and over again. There's tons of Bible verses on this. So, spiritual death is, for example, relational separation from man from God. Physical death, or what modern people call biological death, is separation of soul from body, and or person, the inner essence of who you are, um, separation from a physical body governed by the human genome. And Jesus experienced that. Divine person of Jesus was separated from his physical body. So yes, he experienced biological death. So yeah,
But in
and
the
then
Christian worldview, biological death is meaningless because it's
no,
not death at all. You never actually die. You just transition. You shed a skin like a lizard. That's all you do.
no. The Bible refers to different types of death, physical death. I could even research the Bible verses if you need that, right? Like it has specific definitions for at least two. Maybe there's a third type of death that I'm
I
forgetting.
don't understand a death of a person who's still alive. So I get that the Bible, there are two different kinds of death. It's the separation of the soul from the body, but that's just astral projection. Right? So I don't need to trivialize astral
That's
projection, but that's just a spirit wandering around outside of the body.
oh,
That's not a
yeah.
death, and it's not a resurrection in astral projection when the spirit comes back to the body. But the way the Bible defines it, that's all death is. But the person is still alive, and they can just move in and out of the body.
No, so there is a what's it called? It's naturalistically permanent separation. Okay, so that's the you're talking about the distinction in your death studies. There's a distinction between clinical death and biological death. So the Bible doesn't speak of clinical death. It's never heard of it. It doesn't understand it, right? It just, well, okay, maybe there are some NDEs in there, but my point here is that it primarily speaks of physical death and spiritual death as the consequences of sin, which is the relevant deaths related to resurrection and that sort of thing, right? So, absolutely, resurrection is specifically about what goes down and what dies, the body and the separation of the soul become reunited, and then they raise up. So the body and the same inner essence. The I'm trying to be specific, so not necessarily soul, but the inner essence of the person is united with the physical body. And that's what is called the resurrection to the Jewish mindset.
Okay, what would it mean for a God to die? And as you answer that, since no one is turning their microphones on right now, what was Jesus identical to the second person of the Trinity? Because remember, he's fully God and fully man, a part of this argument. And so, as second person of the Trinity, fully God, as the wearing the human suit, I guess, fully man. So was it the spirit? Was it the second person? We'll call him Logos. Was it Logos in the Jesus suit? And did Logos die?
Yes. So Logos was in the Jesus suit, and the Logos experienced biological death. It was the Logos. I'm assuming you mean by Logos, you're talking about the
Second person of Trinity.
the second person, right? So yeah, the person was embodied in a physical body governed by the human genome, and then he was separated at that on the cross in 30 A.D. So yes, the Logos experienced death. And the Logos is a part of God, 1/3 of God, basically.
Okay, so the
So, Dale,
Logos. I'm just going to get this straight, and then I'm going to. In fact, I'm going to walk away for about 3 minutes. So the Logos was alive and has been eternally existing. Jesus was not alive and only temporarily existed. And I'm thinking of Jesus. I'm trying to. It's confusing to me. Jesus. This is why I say the Jesus suit, because the thing animating the Jesus suit is a thing that was already there, and so all that happened then under this idea is something that was already alive, took on another aspect, and then left the aspect. But at no point did the aspect change. And therefore, at no point did the aspect die. And so the thing that died was never God and could not be God now.
Okay, so I'm going to stop using Logos and stuff because you're getting confused by Catholics and creeds and all this nonsense, right? So Jesus and the Logos are the same. There's one person. So I'm just going to call it Jesus, right? From now on, okay? So you understand, like the second person.
So would it have been proper, say, before creation, to call him Jesus? Is it proper to say Jesus pre-existed time and has always been eternal?
Yeah, the person that we called Jesus, well, during time frame 6 BC to 30 AD, and before that, he had a different name. It's the Son of God, Logos.
Okay, so then I'm fine with your calling him Jesus if we're saying that Jesus is the eternal being. But Jesus didn't have a body.
Correct.
Okay, so once again, the fully human part of Jesus is just a suit.
No. Because so what you're talking about here is it's called in philosophy, it's called a kind nature, right? So what is the set of essential properties for being a kind of thing? So for example, prior to the incarnation, Jesus had all of the properties for being a divine kind of thing: omniscience, omnipotence, personhood, whatever, right? All
Immortality,
eternality and stuff like that. Yeah. All of the essential personal properties for being a divine kind of divine personal kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because some properties are owned only by the Trinity. None of the persons individually have them. For example, okay, so there's a distinction there. So all of the divine personal, essential divine person properties, Jesus had that. And then he gained the property of being embodied in a physical body governed by the human genome. And that is what I argue is the essence of a human kind of thing. What are the essential properties for a human being? I say it's a person embodied in a physical thing or body governed by the human genome. That's all it means to be a human. That's the essence of being a human being. So I don't go for all this nonsense that, oh, well, Jesus, God is his divine essence. He had to have his own soul. And then as a human, he had to have a human soul and a human mind and a human will and a divine will. And this is all nonsense. This is incoherent nonsense from later creeds. It makes the Trinity illogical and irrational. So mine is much more simple. And yes, it's considered heresy by most Christians, but at least it's logically coherent and biblically consistent. And I don't care if I'm aggravating Eastern Orthodox people or Catholics because, oh, well, that violates the sixth creed of, or the seventh creed of Nicaea or something. Who cares? So yeah, you understand my model, right? There's a person, and all that changes in terms of acquiring a human nature is he becomes embodied. That person becomes embodied in a physical substance governed by the human genome.
Okay, look. I'm trying to go pee. All right, I want to go, and I want to leave. I hope the Simpsons character chimes in. To be honest, the what I
Darren unmuted himself earlier, so
yeah, no, well, he's not the Simpson character.
Oh, Brian. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but that said, whoever unmutes next, I'm just going to have to listen back to the show and hear what they say. But the problem that one of the things that I'm having trouble, even with your slightly tuned, and I do appreciate the clarification, take on this is that part of a human is being a brain, and as a secularist understands a human, I am fully the thing that I am in this body. So if this body dies, I die. I am not something else that is living right now. Now, if you say dualism, okay, then I could say kind of like in that great series, Altered Carbon, excellent book series, and not too bad of a Netflix series. All I would be doing then with dualism is sloughing off the skin and putting on another skin. But I wouldn't die. I would simply be transitioning from one skin to another skin. Now, that's not how I, as a secularist, understand death. And it sounds so there's only one brain, there's only one me. But if Jesus is eternal spirit, so he's whatever brain he is, whatever personality, whatever controls his personality, that's him. And he enters a fully human body that has a brain, an independent thinking brain, then he's either two people in one body, or he's one person and he's gotten rid of the brain so that he's just wearing the human suit. And so there's still complexity in what you think Jesus was. Because once again, if it's just the suit, who cares if that thing dies? It was never God anyway. But if there's something in the suit that is an actual DNA person that the spirit kind of possesses and shares with the body, that's very confusing. So with that, you're going to look, your answer is going to be great. It's going to be lost on me for the next 3 minutes. So by all means, folks, this is an after show is not moderated. So do what you do.
I see Darren.
Be nice to each other.
I'll just let him go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So Dale,
Go ahead, Darren.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, you do understand how inconsequential this whole thing sounds from a non-Christian, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, it depends I mean, on the type
Because
of
I mean,
non-Christian. It's for David, this is his life. For you as not growing up as a Christian, I would see this is just how discussing how the unicorn's horn spirals or something.
right, but I mean, from okay, from my perspective, the story is that an omnipresent being who is everywhere on Earth anyways, and assumed assumingly all everywhere in hell, if he's actually omnipresent, anyways, comes down to Earth, makes himself a human body, gets himself crucified, and then goes to hell where he's already anyways because he's omnipresent. I mean, you understand how, I mean, do you understand how, I
I
don't want to say
understand that's a
silly, but
problem.
it's just,
No, yeah, like so the problem is you have a misunderstanding what omnipresence is. That the property of omnipresence, as I advocate for it, does not entail those silly things. Because look, first of all, your definition is obviously false because God is spaceless. If he's literally everywhere, that means he has spatial dimensions. He has spatial extension, for example. So obviously that's not the proper definition of omnipresent.
well, I'm
No,
just using the dictionary definition of omnipresent. If you want to use a different word, that's fine with me.
sure. Well, the dictionary, okay. Well, I always school people. The dictionary is kind of the default. So I will just say this: that a proper biblical and fully fleshed out philosophical understanding of omnipresence is different than the dictionary definition. So I will specify what I mean then. So what I mean by that is that God is causally active at all spatial locations, and he's consciously aware of all true propositions related to all, everywhere, all places, all spatial locations, and stuff like that. So, yeah, he's consciously aware of, and he's causally, um, I don't want to say active because he's not necessarily always, yeah, well, yeah, he's actually causally active everywhere, right? He's sustaining space and existence and stuff. So that's the definition of omnipresence that I'm using. Does that help at all
That,
resolve some of the silliness?
no, that sounds completely incoherent, quite honestly.
Okay. And I'm guessing because that's due to an interaction thing, because you deny that non-physical beings can exist in the first place. So therefore, how could a not obviously
No,
omnipresence
no,
requires
I'm
an
saying that if he's causing something to happen, he has to be there to cause it.
well, that's not necessarily true. And we learn that from quantum physics, right? Because the
No,
quantum
that's not.
entanglement proves that things at great distances beyond where the speed of light could travel, kind of thing. If you affect
No,
something, it can affect something.
that's not actually true. We can get into that if you really want, but I'll just say that
Yeah,
your
just briefly.
understanding of that is not necessarily accurate. I mean, yes,
Okay.
it does affect that way, but it's because they are in effect the same thing, the wave. It's a whole thing. Anyways,
But that's an interpretation. That's an attempt to explain this phenomenon. The fact is quantum entanglement. That's what we
well,
observe.
that's what pops out of the math. The same thing that gives us the same math that gives us quantum entanglement gives us that understanding of it. So, I mean, like I said, we can go into it if you want. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that the um, the idea that God is causing something and not there is
Well,
just seems
let me just ask
incoherent.
this thing, because I do have to go in like 15 minutes. So, and I want to hear from everyone. But Darren, with respect to the topic of God dying, what is the issue with omnipresence and making that, at least as I understand it, like how does that, why is that a problem for Jesus dying on the cross?
Well, because well, as you understand, I don't know because I don't understand what you understand. From my understanding, from the basic definition of omnipresent, he never, he was on the earth, then he had a body on the earth, then he didn't have a body on the earth, but he was still on the earth, and then he's supposed to go to hell, but he's already in hell, and he just is supposed to be there for 3 days, but he's always been there because that's what omnipresent means. It's just it's just a inconsequential story. It doesn't really mean anything. And then the whole motivation behind it is silly because he's has to forgive people in this way so that he doesn't torture him for all eternity. That just seems bizarre and incoherent all on its own.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm back, and I'm just going to toss another log in there so that I would like you to address Darren and get other people on the mic. But also, I guess my closing thought, so much more I want to say. I don't understand the point of resurrection, even for the human that is, has existential crisis. So if you believe that Jesus is eternal and God is eternal, and God is spirit, and that heaven is some kind of spirit place where spirit beings exist and can exist eternally. Why do you want the flesh back? Because you're already a spirit person. And so death for you would be a release from the flesh prison. And you get to live like God in heaven. We don't need the pantomime of resurrection. It's a useless step. Are we going to eat in heaven? No. Are we going to poop in heaven? No. Are we going to have sex in heaven? No. Why do we need any part of a body in a place where bodies don't naturally exist in a way where we're going to live forever? The very idea of resurrection is pointless. It's senseless. I don't understand it, and it seems like only a so-so story plot for people who are scared of losing what they have. And it's just nothing more than that. It's not coherent otherwise.
Well, so it's true that we're not going to be having sex in heaven. That the need for that and purpose for that is gone in the new heavens and the new earth. You keep leaving off the new earth aspect of it, right? Where we do need a physical body. Jesus was resurrected and he ate. So we will be eating in the end times state. That's a pleasure that God has given us, and we can't appreciate it without our bodies. So that
If
we
it's a
will be
pleasure, why didn't he have? Were they not eating before? Were they not doing whatever the spiritual
absolutely.
equivalent was before?
Adam and Eve ate before they
No,
fell.
I don't mean humans. I mean God. In spirits, once again, we are fundamentally spirit beings in the Christian world. The body is just an add-on that is not necessary for our existence. And so
No,
why do we?
that's a very Greek pagan way of looking at it. It's
Well,
it's
but
that's
in heaven, I'm right. If we're looking at a new Earth, then you're right. But
okay.
you have to understand that I didn't really grow up with the idea that
So
humans were going to be living on Earth. I was looking forward to heaven, not.
that's only an intermediate, biblically speaking, right? That's only an intermediate state. And Paul tells us that's a lesser state of being. You're naked when you're without your body.
Mm.
It's not as good. It's great. It's greater than this fallen world because you're in the presence of Jesus, but it's not where you want to stay.
So
You want
God
to
was
get back.
lacking when He didn't have a body.
God was not lacking because
Then neither
that's
would
part
we
of
be
his essence.
lacking, right?
No, but we are. We were designed to be physical beings. The human essence entails physicality, and therefore we are not complete
Okay. I'm gonna
when
shut
we
off my
are.
mic again, so that I can just listen. But sorry.
But you would admit, biblically speaking, this isn't me making it up. As Brian says, I'm just making stuff up. But no, this is what the biblical worldview is. And since you're giving an internal critique, what the Bible says counts as evidence and
I
stuff. And
think the biblical, I think the jury is out on the biblical worldview. That is not a. It may be a consensus today. Consensus today. It is not the only view of eschatology, though, and so I can understand that view, but I grew up very much knowing the Bible pretty well and thinking that that view is wrong. And I'm not alone. I'm not weird in that. So sure, I think it's weird to want to live on Earth, no matter what form it is, for eternity. When the whole point, especially in black churches, is to go to heaven, where things are perfect, to get away from this body of sin and this world of woe. I understand everything will be fixed, but the real fix is we won't be here anymore. And so, look, I don't want to turn this into all the millions of ways that eschatology can be viewed. I am acknowledging that it might make sense under a view where you're thinking that you're just going to be on Earth all the time. But my understanding has been that the best state would be the state that God is in, and God never needed a body. So the body feels like a consolation prize.
In terms of the best state, it's weird. Like, it doesn't make sense, I think, because look, we are. It's impossible for any creature to be a maximally great being like God is, or a real maximally great being. That's
But we
not
can be a being without a body.
yes, right. But it's better. God designed us. It's better, even better for us to be embodied and that sort of thing. And it doesn't make sense, to say, well, maybe I could be a not. God could have made human beings to not be humans and to be some other thing. Yeah, he made angels, right? You're saying he could have made us all angels. But what does the Bible tell us? The angels are actually envious of us. We are actually better off. Once we're rid of the effects of the fall, we're made uniquely in the image of God, not these bodiless bodiless angels, as great as they are and as amazing as they are, especially from our perspective here in this fallen
Seems
world.
like those guys have bodies. Either that or they're
They
putting
take
on bodies when they come here. They take them off when they go there, and all of that just means
their essence.
right. But that means that the body is just meaningless. It's meaningless to say that you die and rise, because once again, the body is just a suit. It's just a meat suit to house the real you, and so there is no dying, not really. And so resurrection again doesn't make any real sense because you're not even using the same body. You might be recycling some material, but it's a totally different body. So I don't get it.
All right. I'll let the Brian's comment because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So just so you guys know, it's my birthday this weekend. So I'm celebrating with some family and friends this afternoon.
It was my birthday earlier in the week, Tuesday.
Happy belated birthday.
14th.
Oh, awesome. Happy belated birthday. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So do any of the Brians have anything to say or? All right, Brian. Okay. Happy birthday.
They very notoriously cannot be bullied into turning their mics on. Look, I've tried.
Yeah, if they don't want to.
I have tried. I have honestly tried. It's embarrassing to try and fail as hard as I've tried. So.
All right. Well, David then, or Darren, who I'll give the one last question to you, and then I'll give an answer. And yeah,
cool.
Who wants to go, David? Okay. Or
Okay.
Darren.
Well, look, for me, if the theology hinges on Jesus making a sacrifice, and it's supposed to be some sacrifice that we understand. So he was alive and then he became dead. It is only meaningful to us if he's dead the way we understand dead. If it's just putting on and taking off a suit and putting it on again, it's meaningless. It's meaningless as a sacrifice. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean any more than me putting on my pants and taking them off and putting some different pants on the next day. It just seems to be an illegitimate kind of it's just a trick, almost. So in my mind, God didn't die. I don't mean that he came and had a bad weekend. Okay, that's another idea, which I share. But what I'm saying is, in a way that a human dies and understands dying, God didn't die. He just took off his freaking pants and put them back on in 18 hours. That's not God dying or doing anything that's meaningful to us. And just as a religion, if humans have this existential fear of having it end, you can give them the assurance that life will go on and it will be even better than what it was before, without sullying it with a resurrection that doesn't mean anything.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I am noticing in the comments, so I was saying Brian is saying it's neat that these are Dale's positions now demonstrate that the actual state of affairs. And he says trying to square your views with the Bible seems like shooting at the wrong target. So yeah, maybe as my last word, I can kind of just address that because so it's true. Again, remember what David's goal is here. So I was fully right because David's argument is an incoherence argument. It was essentially an argument trying to say that the biblical Christian doctrines of the resurrection is incoherent. It doesn't make sense because of X, Y, and Z kind of thing, right? So in the first place, so insofar as those incoherences relate to biblical contradictions or things that don't make sense in the Bible, I can appeal to biblical teachings to clarify what those doctrines are and to show that there is no internal contradictions. Now, that said, on this front, David did ask me right in the beginning, and that it did legitimately expose a weakness because I don't think they can be proven without the use of divine revelation. There are certain propositions, a lot of propositions, that can only be believed rationally because we have divine testimony from the Bible stating it. I can't prove historically that Jonah was swallowed by a whale. How on God's green earth would you prove that? And from purely secular historical perspective, oh well, it says it happened in the book of Jonah, for the Bible tells me so. That's not good reasoning, right? From a secular perspective. So basically, there are certain things we can only prove in a secular way indirectly. So I could prove Jonah was swallowed by a whale by proving step one, that the Bible says so. Step two, the Bible is sufficiently attached to the truth of Christianity. And then step three, I have good secular reasons for believing Christianity is true because I can prove the resurrection or one of its essential doctrines is true or something like that. That's the only way. But otherwise, it's just impossible. I can't prove to you that Jonah was swallowed by a whale. I can't prove to you Jesus turned water into wine directly through secular reasoning. I can't prove to you that God is omnipresent in the way that I define it, or that the biblical definition of death is true or something like that, that there is a soul. Well, I can prove that there's a soul, but Darren would beg to differ, and stuff like that. Yeah, I hope that's my answer to you, Brian, is that it's unreasonable of you to constantly go prove on secular grounds, prove every little claim you make. And as though I have to do that, I can't rely on the Bible as a reasonable person. No, it all depends on, am I warranted in relying on the Bible as truthful divine testimony or not? And on that front, I can establish those logical dots. So yeah, that's my answer there. But yeah, thank you. I do have to go. I'm getting a pizza now, so I can hear knocking on the door. But yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, David. And let's do another show soon sometime. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thank you for suggesting what lunch is going to be for me. I hadn't considered it,
pepperoni with extra cheese, my favorite. So, all right.
Look, I'm with you. We have some points of agreement, my friend. You have a great day, and we'll follow up with another show at some point.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody. Good seeing everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. So good. I think that was a good talk. Darren, would you catch me up just real brief, just like 2 minutes? What were you guys talking about? How did it get to the speed of light in the time that it took me to go pee? I feel like something just turned all the way upside down. So,
Well, that's what happens when you lead the conversation.
okay.
Um, Basically, I was using the dictionary definition of omnipresent, and he wanted to use a different definition of omnipresent. And he was saying that something can be the cause of something, even though it's not like attached to it and not actually there. So that's what that's how that
Okay.
came about.
So, yeah, omnipresence is, I mean, we could take all of those particular traits and make an incoherence argument. And so I agree with you. It's something that I toyed with doing a couple of weeks ago, just a thought piece on omnipresence and what the heck that could possibly mean, especially considering that death is, sometimes defined as being away from God's presence. So you're defining omnipresence and hell being away from God's presence. So again, so God can't be omnipresent if you can get away from him. And so the other thing he can't be is immutable. This was one of the arguments that I was going to make today, if it go in a different way. If God is immutably his characteristics, and omnipresence is one of them, he can't decide to stop being present. He can't. It's his nature to be present everywhere. And yet we are told that hell is going to be God basically changing his nature so that he's not present. Well,
Yeah,
the
but you're
moment he
using the
does that, then he's not God
yeah, but
because he's not omnipresent.
right, but you're using the normal definition of omnipresent. Dale was trying to change the definition so that it just meant he knew all true facts and he was the cause of everything
Okay,
existing.
knowing all true facts is another one of those incoherent problems, though, because Jesus didn't know all true facts. If Jesus is 100% God, and I know the Christian argument because I understand the theology, even the biblical authors have to address some of this, it would be that, Jesus set aside some of these godly traits. But again, that's incoherent because God can't change his nature. And so if his nature is omniscience, the moment you take away some of your knowledge from yourself, you're not omniscient anymore and you're not God anymore. So what we're learning about God is he's just a kind of a transient being. Sometimes he's like this, sometimes he's like that, but there is no nature. His nature is rather squishy. Sometimes he can be alive and immortal. Sometimes he can set that aside and be dead. Sometimes he can know stuff. Sometimes he can't. Sometimes he can do everything. Sometimes he can't defeat chariots with iron. And so when you bring that into a moral question, well, God can't act outside of his nature. Well, yes, the fuck he can. We have shown in every attribute Christians have given him, biblically, God acts outside of his nature whenever he goddamn feels like it. And so if God wanted to rape a woman and that was against his nature, he could just set aside his nature and do it. God is a truth being. If God wants to lie to some fools, he can just set aside his nature and lie. There's no reason to trust anything about God if he can just set aside any characteristic of his nature, including his immutability, and thus leave us any reason to trust or follow this God. The incoherence argument may seem like a halfway partial kind of so-so argument, but it's actually extremely strong because everything, if one thing can be incoherent about him, everything can be. If one part of his nature can be different, every part of his nature can be different. There's no reason to ever follow such a God, even if real, because you have no reason to believe he's going to keep his word about anything.
Well, I think what you're missing is that he's unchangeable, so of course he can change.
All right, I'm going to order my pizza now. And with that, folks, B-Way, I thank you for showing up. I wish I could have put some time in the comments. If I were wearing my Vision Pro, which I thought about doing, I could have made the screen really big and I could read all the comments, and that would be good. I would have had to turn off the video, but otherwise I could have done that. Whenever I am not wearing it, I have to deal with what for me is a tiny screen. And one of the things I have to give up in doing this stuff, which is one of the reasons I could probably never be successful at TikTok lives, I can't read the comments. I wouldn't try. It would derail the show. But I appreciate the fact that you were there and making them, and I thank you all. Thank you, Emperor. I am sorry that we did not get a chance to interact today. Thank you, Darren. And with that, I am going to hit a button, do some editing, eat a pizza, and I will see you in the comments.